the first love I felt was for a violet. I looked at this tiny little flower in Cumbria. It's now called Cumbria now, it used to be called Cumberland, on the fells, which are fairly bald, but just this tiny little purple flower surviving all the winds. And it was the first poem I ever wrote to a violet. Some would think this a bit sentimental. But being true to the love that you feel for everything, starting with something as small as a tiny little flower surviving on a bald fell, as it's called in Cumbria. The fact that I remember it means that it was deeply significant to me. I then read a lot of poetry, especially by Wordsworth, excuse me, who was local up there. And of course he wrote to flowers too, so I felt, okay, not such a twerp. I thought I can link with others. And I couldn't stop writing poetry because the creative energy, and love is the creative energy, it needs to create, it needs to express itself. And I always knew from about 7 onwards, 7 being a very significant age, that I wanted to be an actor. And I got my first job when I was 16 in the post was an offer to go to Cumberland. I was then in Oxfordshire, so right to the top of the country. Back to where my first memories of loving nature, basically, and the aloneness, and yet the feeling of oneness with the beauties, the bleak beauties of the Cumbrian hillsides. So I got my first job when I was 16, and people never talk about it now, and they don't seem to know about it even, but it was called Fit Up. We were doing a play a day. A play a day at 16. Yes, I'd done plenty of drama at school. And it's, well, I can tell one anecdote, which was when I said it was called The Famous Players at 16. And it was run by a couple of thespians who were obviously getting on a bit, but still playing what we used to call the Juve leads, or the leading parts, or whatever. And I was doing the character parts. And it came to that old comedy, Charlie's Aunt. And we went into rehearsal in the morning. I mean, the programme was, we'd meet in the morning, read the scripts, rehearse in the afternoon, block it, so we knew where to move, etc., and learn the lines during the process, and then act the play to 3 Men and a Dog in the evening in church halls. So when it came to Charlie's Aunt, I said, "Please, Wendy, could I have a script?" And she said, "But it's Charlie's Aunt." I said, "Yes, but I need a script." She said, "Everyone knows Charlie's Aunt." I said, "I don't even know Charlie's uncle. Could I have a script, please?" And she said, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter, darling. I tell you what, if you don't say the lines, we'll say them for you." Of course, you don't forget something like that. And at one time, I do remember, I think I was playing 2 characters, and one time I had to chase myself. So confusion reigned. But what a marvellous experience. What a marvellous learning experience. And life is about learning. And for me, life is about learning more about love. I went into the army, and I made up my mind that I was longing to be a pacifist, and I was really agonizing. I've agonized a lot in my life about the contradictions. How could I be peaceful and loving, and yet be putting on a military uniform? And I was very good at it, being an actor. I could go to the barrack square and bark as loud as anyone else, and have the soldiers doing all of that, you know. And the actor side of me really enjoyed role playing, but inwardly all the time I knew I wasn't balanced, and that there was a greater wisdom to find, and that I needed to find it and act it and use the energy of it in a useful way for the greatest good. And while I think love does really begin with me, for me, love always begins with God. And I was always a God botherer. And to help oneself become more godly, which I think is the journey, one needs to be more loving. There is no other way. The unconditional thing I addressed earlier, it is the letting go. And not being judgmental, being generous in attitude. So in the army, yes, I was struggling with my soul, basically. How could I allow the possibility of killing another? Well, fortunately, I got some reruns. In being a versatile actor, which I was, I couldn't work out how I could use a snuff box and know exactly how to use it without being told how to put on a Grecian garment or a Roman toga or whatever. Nobody told me how to do it. I could do it all, as though I was born to it. And that got me into the feeling of, well, maybe I was in ancient Greece. I was always very attracted to Socrates and Plato and those teachings. Maybe I had been in ancient Rome. So that led me into, why could I be whatever I was paid to be, because I was a professional actor, unless I had been it already? And later, when I became a teacher, first of drama and then of English and literature, synthesizing it all, I began to work out for myself, well, the whole of creation seems to be inside each of us. But that's too big to cope with in any one body, in any one lifetime, in any one short span of a lifetime. So for me, the generosity of creation must, like in recycling, what if souls get recycled? How could I carry? Yes, there are many, many explanations in genes. Then we know that genes carry memory, and the body carries memory, and water carries memory. So if you put all that together, then maybe I am a memory box. And that inside it is all of life. That's why I do think that the arts, the modern educational system in this country, is closing down the very things that open people's heart. And that is nearly always anything that's based on personal creativity and personal choices. The more choices you take away from people, the slower they will be to find their center, their true self. Because they're being turned into a robot, an obedient, quasi-blind robot who feels that everyone else is their expert. But for me, the journey is to how to be your own expert. And the thing about a phrase like "love begins with me" is that many fundamentalists of any faith system will say, isn't that selfish? And from their point of view, which we will allow, they're right. And I do think that everyone has the right to be right. And that's, again, predicated on the free will that's given to us, it seems to me, in the generous spirit of the creation, or creator. As to we agree with them or not, unconditional love is a matter of how to be comfortable with not agreeing with other viewpoints.